Have you ever imagined driving your car like any other ordinary day until one of the biggest sports icons enters your vehicle without warning? What if I told you that, in addition to this unbelievable encounter, he left something behind, something so valuable that it could change his life forever? What would you do if you were in that driver's shoes? The story you will hear today is one of those that seems like a movie script, a simple Uber driver driving through the streets of the city. Without imagining that, in a few minutes he would have a passenger that any basketball fan would do anything to meet. But what really shocked this man wasn't just having Michael Jordan inside his car, but what happened after the basketball legend got out of the vehicle. Imagine the scene. You receive a new race in the app without paying much attention to the name. The passenger gets in, and in the blink of an eye, you realize you are face to face with one of the greatest athletes of all time. Your heart races, your mind tries to process what's happening, but you need to stay calm. And so begins a race that would change everything. But the big twist in this story was yet to come. As the driver continued his journey, something strange caught his attention in the back seat. At first, it seemed like just any forgotten object, but as he looked closer, he realized he was looking at something unbelievable, something that could be worth millions, and that somehow had been left by Michael Jordan. Now I ask you, what would you do in this situation? Would you return what you found? Would you try to contact Jordan? Or would you keep this as a unique souvenir of this historic encounter? This story has an ending that no one expected, and I guarantee that you will be surprised by what happened when the driver decided to act. But before I continue, I want to know, have you ever been through something similar? Ever found something valuable that someone else lost? Leave your comment below and get ready, because the next part of this story will leave your jaw dropped. What Michael Jordan forgot inside this Uber changed the driver's life forever. He only realized it later, and when he saw it, he couldn't believe it. Now imagine this scene. You're working, driving your car like you do every day, picking up passengers without even paying much attention to the names that appear on the app. Until suddenly, a new race appears on the screen. Just another ordinary trip, right? But this time, the passenger who gets into his car is none other than Michael Jordan. Yes, the greatest basketball player of all time, the living legend, the man who built an empire on and off the court. Your heart races. Your mind tries to process the situation, but you have to act normally. How do you talk to someone so great without sounding like a crazed fan? The driver, still surprised, takes a deep breath and continues driving, trying to remain calm. But he had no idea that this simple encounter held a twist that would change his life in a way he never imagined. The race continued smoothly. Michael Jordan, polite and discreet, answered some of the driver's questions and maintained a friendly tone, but without extending the conversation too much. For the driver, that was already an unforgettable moment. After all, how many people in the world can say they transported one of the sport's greatest legends? But what he didn't know was that the true impact of this encounter would come after Jordan got out of the car. As soon as he dropped the passenger off at their destination, the driver looked in the rearview mirror and felt that something was different in the back seat. Initially, it seemed like just a small forgotten object, something without much importance. But as he took it in his hand, he felt a shiver run through his body. This was more than just a forgotten possession. It was something valuable, something rare, something that could change your life forever. Jim has always been a hard-working man, one of those guys who wakes up early every day, gets behind the wheel and drives for hours on end to make ends meet for his family. For him, Uber wasn't just a job, it was his main source of income. With bills piling up, rent getting tight, and 2 young children to raise, every run mattered. He couldn't afford to miss a single day of work. But that morning, as he turned on the app and adjusted the rearview mirror, he had no idea that this would be the most unbelievable day of his life. Jim was never a luxury guy. His car wasn't the newest, but it was always clean and well-maintained. His dream was to one day buy a better vehicle, offer more comfort to passengers, and who knows, even work as a private driver for a large company. But while that didn't happen, he did his best to secure good reviews and move on. The routine was always the same: accepting rides, picking up hurried passengers, listening to random stories, and trying to remain patient with those who came in sullenly, talking on the phone, and ignoring your polite greeting. But that day, something different happened. When a new call appeared on the app, he accepted it without thinking twice, as he always did. However, as soon as he parked at the boarding point and saw who was approaching the car, he felt his heart race. Jim blinked a few times, thinking he was seeing things, but no, it was real. Michael Jordan was getting into his car. The man who revolutionized basketball, owner of a billion-dollar fortune, a living legend. Jim swallowed hard, held tight to the steering wheel, and tried to hide his nervousness. How to act normally in front of a global icon? His instinct told him to start a conversation, but did Jordan want to talk? Would he care about a simple driver like him? Jim's first reaction was silence. He didn't want to seem inconvenient, but the urge to say something was uncontrollable. With sweaty hands on the steering wheel, he took a deep breath and decided to test the waters. "Good afternoon, sir," he said, trying to sound natural. Jordan looked up, gave a slight smile, and responded with a simple, "What's up, man?" His voice was calm, unhurried, unarrogant. Unlike what many might imagine about a star of his level, Jordan seemed like an ordinary man, with no intention of attracting attention. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt, a flat-brimmed cap, and sunglasses. Simple, discreet, like someone who just wanted to go his way without being noticed. Jim gripped the steering wheel tighter, still trying to digest what was happening. His heart told him to start a conversation, ask about basketball, about his Chicago Bulls days, about the NBA Finals. But what if Jordan didn't want to talk? What if he was one of those guys who didn't like interacting with strangers? Then, in the midst of this internal dilemma, something unexpected happened. Jordan noticed Jim's hesitation and, with his calm demeanor, decided to break the ice. "First, busy day?" he asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Jim laughed nervously. "Now it's more interesting." Jordan let out a discreet laugh. It was the kind of answer he was probably already expecting. But instead of closing the subject, he continued, "How many hours do you drive a day?" Jim, surprised by the star's curiosity, replied that he spent around 10 to 12 hours behind the wheel, trying to end the day with a good amount to pay the bills. Jordan listened attentively, without rushing, as if he really cared. And at that moment, Jim realized something he never would have imagined. Michael Jordan, basketball's greatest legend, was extremely humble and caring. The trip continued smoothly, without exaggeration, without fuss. Jim did everything he could to hold back his excitement and act naturally, but inside, he knew that day would be remembered forever. But he had no idea that the most unbelievable part of this story was yet to come. Now tell me, if it were you in Jim's place, what would you ask Michael Jordan? Comment your dream question below. Jim tried to stay calm, but the feeling of driving for Michael Jordan was surreal. He wondered if he should make more conversation or simply enjoy the silence of that unique moment. The basketball star looked out the window, thoughtful, as if he were in another world. Every now and then, he made a slight movement with his hands, as if he were organizing his thoughts or perhaps even remembering his glory days on the court. The trip was coming to an end. There were just a few minutes left until the final destination, and even without having had a long conversation, Jim felt that that race would be one of those stories that he would tell for the rest of his life. But he still didn't know that the most unbelievable part of this story was yet to happen. Once they arrived at the location, Jordan took a pair of sunglasses out of his pocket and slowly put them on. He took out his cell phone, checked something on the screen, and then looked at Jim in the rearview mirror. "Thanks for the run, man. He takes care of himself." Jim nodded, still somewhat unresponsive. "It was an honor, Mr. Jordan." Jordan smiled slightly, opened the door, and got out of the car as calmly as he had gotten in. Within seconds, he was already walking into the building, while Jim was still trying to assimilate everything that had just happened. He let out a sigh, like someone lifting a weight off his chest. It was official. He had just driven for the greatest basketball player of all time. Still in disbelief, he looked in the rearview mirror, as if his mind needed more proof that it really happened. It was then that he noticed something strange in the back seat. At first, he thought it was just a detail of the upholstery or some other object, but then, when he turned his head to get a better look, he felt a shiver run up his spine. There was something there, something that wasn't there before. Jim frowned, hesitated for a moment. Would it be possible? Did Michael Jordan forget something in his car? He took a deep breath, slowly turned around and reached out to pick up the object. And when he finally saw what it was, he felt his heart stop for a second. He couldn't believe what he was holding. Jim felt his heart race. He was holding something that belonged to Michael Jordan, an object that at first glance seemed inconspicuous, but had a much greater weight than he could imagine. His hands were sweaty as he turned the item over between his fingers, trying to understand the gravity of the situation. Did that really happen? Did he really forget that in my car? The initial impulse was simple. He needed to give back. It was the right thing to do. But at the same time, an insistent thought began to creep into his mind. What if he kept it? After all, who could blame him? Jordan already had billions, while he struggled to pay his bills every month. Maybe that was a sign, a gift from destiny. Jim shook his head, trying to dispel the idea. But the doubt was still there, lingering. What would Michael Jordan do with that? Would he really miss it? Was it just an unimportant object or something of inestimable value? He decided to research. He took out his cell phone and typed a few words into Google, trying to find any clue as to what he had in hand. What appeared on the screen made his stomach drop. The object was extremely rare, a unique piece, a personalized item that could be worth a fortune. His heart beat even faster. He was holding something that could change his life forever. The weight of the decision increased. He looked at the object again, running his fingers over the engraved details. If he sold it, he could pay off all his debts, give his family a better life, finally get out of that tiring routine of driving for hours and hours without knowing if he would be able to pay the monthly bills. But what about your conscience? Could he live knowing he took something that didn't belong to him? Doubt grew like a knot squeezing his chest. He needed to decide. Jim took a deep breath. The decision weighed like never before. He looked at the object in his hands, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. If you kept that, you could change your financial life from one moment to the next. But what if you tried to return it? Would Michael Jordan even realize he had lost? Or worse, would he think Jim was trying to take advantage of the situation? After a few minutes of staring at the object, he made a decision. I was going to return it. It was the right thing to do. But how? How would a simple Uber driver get in touch with one of the sport's greatest legends? There was no number to call, no email, no direct contact. He went to Google and typed in Michael Jordan advice. Nothing useful appeared. He tried social media, forums, anything that could lead him to someone on the Stars team. Nothing. Desperation began to hit. What if he just showed up where he left Jordan and tried to talk to him? But would he still be there? Jim knew that for someone of that level of fame, schedules changed quickly. He couldn't waste time. He decided to act. He drove as fast as he could to where he left Jordan. Arriving there, he found a security guard at the door of the building. He took a deep breath, got out of the car and approached. "Excuse me, sir. I'm an app driver and I brought Michael Jordan here a few minutes ago. He forgot something in my car. I need to return it." Phew. Security guard raised an eyebrow suspiciously. "Michael Jordan? He is sure?" Jim nodded, opening his hands to show the object. The man analyzed for a moment, picked up the radio and said some words that Jim couldn't quite hear. A minute passed. 2 minutes. 3. The wait seemed endless. Then, suddenly, a familiar voice came from the back of the lobby. "You said you found something of mine?" Jim froze. It was him. Michael Jordan again, looking right at him. The driver swallowed hard, stretched out his hand and showed what he had found. Jordan looked at the object, and his expression completely changed. Jim felt his heart race when he saw Michael Jordan standing in front of him. The man who marked generations in basketball was there, looking directly at him. The driver took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure, and held out the object he found in the back seat. His mind was spinning with 1,000 possibilities. How would Jordan react? Did he even remember that he had lost it? Jordan took the item calmly, but the moment his eyes fell on it, his countenance changed completely. The discreet smile disappeared. He frowned, took a deep breath and turned the object over in his hands, observing every detail with a gaze that carried something deeper. It was as if suddenly he had been transported to another time, to another moment in his life. Jim realized that this wasn't just any belonging. That meant something much bigger to Michael Jordan. The silence between the two seemed eternal. Then Jordan let out a heavy sigh and muttered, almost to himself, "I thought I would never see this again." Jim felt a shiver run through his body. He knew he had done the right thing, but now he realized how important that object was to Jordan. The former player continued to hold the item delicately, as if it were something extremely fragile. His eyes sparkled for a moment, and Jim realized that this was no ordinary glow. It was emotion. A memory was stamped in those eyes. "This object," Jordan started to speak, but stopped, as if it were difficult to put it into words. He then looked at Jim and said, in a voice full of feeling, "That was a gift from my father." Jim held his breath. Everyone knew the story. Michael Jordan's father, James Jordan, was murdered in 1993, one of the saddest moments in the player's life. And now, there, before him, was an object that linked him directly to that memory. Jordan ran his hands over his face, took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He looked at Jim differently. "Dude, you have no idea what this means to me." Jim felt a lump in his throat. He just nodded, understanding the depth of that moment. Jordan closed his eyes for a moment and held the object tightly, as if he were reliving years of memories. When he opened them again, he seemed to have made a decision. He looked at Jim and smiled. "You are a rare guy. Most would have stayed with that." Jim smiled back, still speechless. "I knew I needed to return. It wasn't mine." Jordan shook his head, impressed. Then he did something Jim would never have expected. He took a very expensive watch off his wrist and placed it in the driver's hand. "This is yours now, for what you did for me." Jim froze. It wasn't about the value of the watch. It was about what it meant. Michael Jordan patted him on the shoulder, held the object affectionately, and before entering the building, looked at it one last time. "Thanks, man." In truth, Jim got into the car, closed the door, and stayed there for a few moments, just trying to take it all in. He had done the right thing, and in the end I had learned a lesson that would last a lifetime. And now I want to know, what would you do if you found something valuable left by a celebrity? Would you return it immediately, or would you be unsure what to do? After all, many would say that something like this could change your life forever. But would the weight on your conscience be worth it? Jim's story makes us reflect on the importance of honesty and how small decisions can define our character. He could have simply kept the object and gone on with his life without anyone ever knowing, but he chose to do right. And in the end, his attitude was rewarded in a way he could never have imagined. And now I ask you, if you were in his shoes, would you have made the same decision? Comment below. I would return it, if you believe that honesty always wins, or I would keep it, if you think that not everyone would have the same attitude. I want to know your opinion. But that wasn't the only time Michael Jordan starred in an emotional moment like this. If this story surprised you, wait until you hear what happened when he met a critically ill child in the hospital and did something no one expected. What he did completely changed this boy's life and moved the whole world. So you already know. If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any more incredible stories like this. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Who knows, maybe this story will inspire more people to do the right thing. Tell me here in the comments, what would you do in this situation? Have you ever been through something similar? I'm curious to know your opinion. Comment, and let's talk about it.